So in the past few weeks, I finally got a chance to play Ico for the first time a whole 20 years after its release. It had been on my radar for quite a long time, even though I really knew nothing about it. Nowadays, it does generally seem forgotten about. People either remember playing it in their childhood, or they know it as the game with amazing Japanese box art and horrifically terrible North American box art. I mean, it's probably the most infamous example of that at this point. But all that aside, even if I honestly didn't enjoy the moment-to-moment actual gamey part of Ico, it was such an eye-opening experience I'd have to recommend it to anyone interested in the history of video games. As many of you know, my favorite game of all time is The Last of Us, and I know I talk about this game like way too much, but when I was playing Ico, I couldn't help but think about how insanely similar these two games are beneath the surface. You see, Ico is a completely narrative-based game, or furthermore, a completely character-based game. Essentially, everything in the game serves one sole purpose, and that is to build a real connection between Ico and Yorda, the two central characters. To any of those who have played it, that sounds a lot like The Last of Us as well. And, well, that's because it is. I'd even argue Ico does it better, but at a cost. So in this video, I want to explore a game that I see as the foundation for my favorite game of all time, and many others as well. So let's take a look at Ico. Companionship is the central theme of Ico, and as I mentioned, basically every part of the gameplay serves to build upon that theme. Let's begin with the story. There's actually a great lack of true cutscenes in the game. The connections and plot are spread through the gameplay instead, although there truly isn't much plot to spread. If you were actually to sum up the story of Ico, it could be done very simply in just a sentence or two, a complaint I have heard about with The Last of Us. But with both these games, people often don't realize that the plot really isn't important. It is once again only present to build the connection between our two central characters. Every major event in Ico has the pair aiding each other at every turn. After all, they can only reach their goal if they work together, and I loved all these different moments displaying their connection, only getting more common as the game progresses. In the beginning, it's always Ico coming to save the day and give out directions, but by the end it's Yorda who saves him. Overall, there is a lot more lore and depth to the plot of Ico, but honestly, even without knowledge of that, I still found it to be very compelling. Now, the gameplay is where things begin to get a bit more complicated. I'll start positive. Ico was incredibly immersive. There is essentially nothing on screen that would imply it's a game. No HUD, no button prompts, only a pause menu, I suppose. This is something pretty uncommon nowadays. Games being hand-holdy is a pretty usual complaint, and it's an understandable one too. And while I did enjoy how atmospheric it was to have no sort of tutorial or direction, I'll admit there was a few moments when I was stuck solely because I didn't know I could do something by pressing a button. Aside from that, the moment-to-moment gameplay consists of about three things: combat, puzzle solving, and simply exploring, the latter of which is my favorite. Both the combat and puzzles could get frustrating to say the least. The combat is easily the worst of the two. It's essentially spamming one button. That's all you do until all the shadow guys are gone. There's honestly no strategy or complexity to it at all, which is surprising based on how many people who worked on Ico went on to help create Dark Souls, which arguably has one of the best combat systems in gaming. And on the other hand, Ico is also from the studio that made Shadow of the Colossus, a game I never finished due to its very clunky combat. Moving on, the puzzles were a little better. They often weren't the most intuitive. The second half of the game is essentially repeating the same puzzle over and over again, but hey, they were alright. though they sometimes did seem like they were trying to be as tedious as possible with the amount of time it would take to climb and such. Alas, even with all these complaints, I still think Ico was an excellent game. And that's because all of these seemingly bad design choices were entirely intentional. You see, the game developers follow the idea of design by subtraction. Basically, there is no extra elements in Ico that don't need to be there. Everything is subtracted right down to the bare minimum to be able to get the theme across to the player. And nowadays, when every game seems to think like quantity over quality with a million identical side quests, it's nice to see something like this, even if it's technically 20 years old. So, even if the combat was boring, it served to show Ico's devotion to protecting Yorda from any threat, even these terrifying shadow monsters he's never came across before. And every single puzzle needs Yorda to be completed. It's either Ico once again showing his companionship by creating a path for Yorda to safely make it through, or Yorda opening magically sealed doors. I mean, it's all connecting back to the theme. And once you realize and appreciate that, it's honestly hard to dislike any of it. Though the game director himself even stated he might have gone a bit too far with the subtraction part. Even he thought the combat could have been a little more exciting. When it really boils down to it, everything in Ico's gameplay and plot connects back to its characters. I mean, even to save, you need both Ico and Yorda resting on a bench. So, it might not be your action-packed thriller, but once you start playing and really build the connection to the leading pair, you'll come to love this grand interconnected world, and especially the peaceful nature of it. It's really a magical thing, exploring as no music plays, and all you can hear is birds chirping and the calls of a boy to a girl he desperately wants to help. So yeah, I may have had some criticisms with Ico, but as a whole, it holds up really well. Even the graphics, and especially the animation, is fantastic. If you've enjoyed games like The Last of Us or Shadow of the Colossus, Ico is obviously a must-play. It's just so nice to return to a bit more simpler of times, and understand where some of the best games of our modern age started out. Thanks for watching everyone, and make sure to go check out Ico. Have a great day. Bye.